What's up, fellas? Welcome to a brand new episode of The Sports Student. My name is Waddell Epps, aka The Sports Student. In today's podcast, I'll be interviewing Valerie Preactor. Valerie just recently graduated from George Mason University, located in Fairfax, Virginia. Throughout her time at George Mason, she had the wonderful privilege of announcing several Division I sporting events for their school on ESPN+. And in this podcast, she'll talk about what it was like to call collegiate games at a very young age, and also give some advice to those getting ready to enter college that are studying sports and news media. So sit back, relax, enjoy the podcast, and without further ado, this is a sports student interview with Valerie Preactor. Ladies and gentlemen, today I am delighted to be joined by Valerie Preactor. Valerie, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. How are you doing, and how's your summer been going?
Thank you so much for having me. First of all, my summer has been great, very relaxed, and I've just been bopping around doing a couple different things, and I'm having the time of my life post-grad, so I'm wonderful. How are you?
I am doing excellent. It's summertime, so obviously couldn't be in a greater mood right now. So first thing first, can you just go ahead and quickly introduce yourself to the audience? Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you got started in the sports media industry, and where you are now.
Sure. So I was born and raised in Baltimore, Maryland. That's where I am right now. And then I went to college at George Mason University in 2017, and I immediately started getting into the athletics program and was in contact with the local news station there on campus, of course. Mason Cable News was what it was called back then. I think it's still called that now, but the specific sector that I was under was sports broadcasting. And so the broadcasting director had reached out to me and was interested in me doing some sort of sideline reporting. And I had never really done anything like that. I kind of seen it on TV, of course, with Aaron Andrews doing football games and stuff like that. And I was like, sure, I love to talk. I'd love to do that in front of a camera. Why not? So I kind of just threw myself into it freshman year and never stopped. And so I kind of did my first soccer game there. At the end of October, was live and made all the mistakes you could possibly imagine. And then I was like, okay, I'm never going to make any more mistakes. And I just learned from there and did 6 sports, men and women's. Of course, George Mason doesn't have a football team. So I did men and women's soccer and lacrosse, volleyball, ended up being involved in softball, which I played in high school. So the director wanted me to do play-by-play for that. So that's kind of where I ended. My last game was me doing a play-by-play by myself this past year. So it was kind of full circle at the end. That was kind of what really got me into it. Was I loved sports. I loved softball, baseball, all that type of stuff. Of course, I love football. We don't have a team, so couldn't do that one. But I think doing all the other sports kind of opened my eyes to what they involve. I had never played soccer, never played any of these sports. And so just knowing a little bit of background of just around the world how they play, soccer included. I didn't know anything about soccer, so I was like, I need to sit on the sidelines and figure it out. And I would ask the coaches questions, and I'd have the broadcast director come over with me and teach me like what does offsides mean, like what does this mean, and just ask a lot of questions. And that's kind of really how I learned and made connections too with the team and the athletes and the coaches as well. And everyone was so gracious and always wanted to help me. And I'm so lucky that I was able to get thrown into that, because I don't think I would have discovered it if I hadn't. So I'm lucky that I did.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I'm really glad that you covered a variety of sports, because I do the same thing too at High Point. And I just feel like it's so important to expand your branch, because sometimes you head into college, you want to broadcast sports. You're like, I just want to do basketball and football. It's like those are the only 2 sports I want to do, but there's so many sports out there. So can you just talk about like that experience, like covering a variety of sports? Like, did you kind of go into each sport with the same mindset, or how was it different in some ways as well?
I think when I started, my very first sport was soccer at George Mason. And my friends played soccer in high school, so I knew a little bit about it, but I didn't really know terms or, the lingo of sports in soccer, of course. So the broadcast director kind of threw me out there, and I was at the time just writing sideline reports on specific players. So I would come up in the middle of, soccer is a little slower. So I would come up when it was a bit of a slower game, and I would do a hit about the opposing team's like best player. And a lot of it in soccer specifically come from foreign countries. So I remember my first one was like from Denmark. So I was saying all these weird like cities that I didn't know how to pronounce, and it made it like really hard for myself to actually like understand what I was even saying. But I think the mindset going in, I was like, oh, I don't know nobody's watching. Like I can just say whatever I want. It doesn't matter. Like I was never nervous about getting in front of the camera and talking about something I was not familiar with, because the way that I go into every sport and everything that I do is nobody's watching. Just say like that. And of course, at the time it was not ESPN Plus. So at the time it was just, we were on the A10 network, which I'd never heard of. I wasn't from Fairfax. And so it was kind of broadcasted through Mason Cable Network and the A10 network. My parents didn't have access to it. So I was like, no, they're not going to see it till afterwards. It doesn't matter. So that was kind of the mindset going into soccer. And then when I was like, hey, I'm down to do volleyball, it doesn't matter. Like I never played that either. I didn't know how that worked at all. And my broadcast director sat me down. And what happened was we were such a close-knit group within that media broadcasting. I had the broadcast director and the graduate assistant, all of us. It was me. I was the only girl there at the time. And it was like two other guys that I was super close with that were also commentators. So I was always on the shows and the games with them, and they would just kind of help me through it. They were both like juniors, seniors, had been doing this forever, and I was just a newcomer coming in, and they were like, here, say this, or ask these questions, and kind of really gave me the guidance that I needed as a freshman to kind of figure it out, but gave me the space to learn and make mistakes on my own, and then be like, also I was my hardest critic, of course, but they would say, okay, well, phrase it differently like this, or that was your really best one. Like, I can't believe that sounded so good. That was the best one I've heard you do so far. And that gave me a lot of confidence going forward. And then, so when I was like, okay, I'm down to do volleyball, they would sit me down and show me how fast the game is played compared to soccer, because it's so different. Obviously every sport's different, but just the pace and the cadence that you need to be speaking in, and like how quick I need to come in the timeouts, and how fast I need to do the interviews with the coaches. And that kind of set me up to every other sport to be like, go in with the mindset of everyone's different, of course, but you can still accomplish everything that you need to do in the time that you have if you just figure out like what timing is and everything like that. And just make sure you're poising your questions correctly to the athletes, the coaches. And interview wise, I learned so much for volleyball, because our very first we hosted the A10 championships my freshman year, which is 2018, in the spring. And so we had people from Pepperdine and Princeton come in, and I would interview those coaches that weren't George Mason coaches. So that kind of set me up for a really fun turn, because I figured out who was a good interviewer and who wasn't. So there was this one coach who was giving me nothing, and I was like, this is my first interview. I don't know what else to say. I only had 3 questions. And he's like, yeah, it was good. And I was like, oh my gosh, I need way more than that. I don't know what I'm doing. So I just watching those back, it was hilarious to me now, because I know I could get through that at this point, but my little freshman self didn't figure it out until later. So, but that was just really good practice. And I think that's the biggest thing to me, is my entire freshman year of doing all these sports. And after like spring season's the craziest, because it's men's volleyball, then you have women's lacrosse, softball, and there's just countless sports that you're doing. So it's like, I would hop from every weekend, I'd have at least 3 games.
Yeah. I mean, that's crazy. I mean, I know how it is, like
college freshman.
Yeah. I mean, the whole like athletics field, like it definitely can get like really hectic, but I mean, being a reporter too, because it's different than, being in the booth, commentating the game. Cause when you're a reporter, it's like all live. You never know what you're going to expect. Can you describe the scenery of Mason Athletics to us? What's George Mason Athletics like? How would you describe it?
So the scenery of it, I think it's a really healthy program. And I think that they really cater to every single sport. There's no inequality there. They love, some of their highest bringing in money, I guess, I don't know, but popularized sports are the women's sports. Since we don't have a football team, I talk about that so much, because that's what usually brings in the most money and the most attention in other schools like Big Ten or SEC. But being in the Atlantic 10, we only have women's lacrosse. So that brings in a lot of people to the games, and it's covered by athletics, covers everyone so healthily. And they bring in, while I was there, they renovated all of the basketball locker rooms. So they're state-of-the-art, brand new, multi-million-dollar locker rooms. Then they take care of their athletes. They really do. And our athletic director, he just retired this past year with his wife, who was working specifically with men's basketball. And I mean, they've worked they went to George Mason and they worked for George Mason for like over 70 years, and they could not be more compassionate and just think about every single athlete. They would always come over to me on the sidelines and talk to me. And that just made me feel so special because, hey, do they even know my name? I don't know, but they came over to me and talked to me as a person and treated me like they would their own, like any other athlete on the field. And so they take care of them really well. And I'll tell you something, the spirit around George Mason is very different because we have a lot of students on campus that are commuters. So not a lot of, I wouldn't say students come to other games besides basketball. Basketball's super huge. And of course, we did not do basketball because ESPN regular covers that. So our broadcast director would do some commentary for the radio there, but I would go to see the games, and there are a lot of people go to those games. So I love supporting the athletes as well because it's such an interesting position to be in when I'm a reporter on the sidelines and I'm talking to these athletes, but then the next day I'm also sitting with them in my class. So it's like, it was such a big moment for me when I had this sophomore year. I had a class with one of our biggest women's basketball athletes, and I had like seen her before, and I worked at our news station, and I was the sports anchor my freshman year as well. And I did, weekly sports updates on what was going on, and I would report on her a lot. And so I ended up being in her group for this one communications class. And I was like, wait, I know her from somewhere. We're like, where do I know her from? And as soon as we like got to ice breaking and everything, I knew exactly who she was. And I was like, wait, now she's my best friend. And I've been reporting on her for a whole year. I was like starstruck. It was such a like cool juxtaposition of like being the reporter that I wanted to be, and then also trying to be like her friend and be like normal about it, even though she was like practically a celebrity in my brain. So it was so cool. And I still talk to her to this day, and she's so fun. And she transferred to a different school and went to the Elite Eight this year in March Madness. So I was so proud of her to do that. And then I was also able to meet her other friend who was on the basketball team. So that being able to get that inside relationship with the student athletes is exactly what I think George Mason does really well, because they don't hide them away. They don't, idolize them as a school. They treat them like everybody else. So they're especially filled in with the rest of us, and they're just treated like student athletes. And they're special, of course, because they have amazing talents, but that's special to me. But they're just like everyone else. And I love being a part of their kind of atmosphere and just getting to know them professionally and personally.
I love that so much, because I think we all know the schools that kind of treat athletes like the kings and queens of the world. But George Mason, I mean, yeah, they definitely seem like they know what they're doing there, and developing those close relationships, it only makes like your job as a reporter like easier, because you get to know these people like closely. I'm curious to know what sort of classes did you take in college that were related to sports media?
So I really didn't get into sports media, I think, until my junior year. I had to get through all those gen ed classes. Yeah. And I finally added, I was a media production concentration since freshman year. And then by going into my senior year, I added journalism as a concentration. So that kind of put me into more news editing and writing classes like that. So then I ended up taking sports in the media. And that kind of taught me just how it's portrayed broadcast wise, which was super cool. So we got to break down the Super Bowl this past year and talk about it. And our teacher would bring in all sorts of guests to talk to us that were either George Mason alums. He wanted to have Diana Rossini come in. She wasn't able to come in, but she's awesome. And she went to George Mason. We had Jim Jackson from the Flyers come in. So a lot of people came to talk to us to just tell us about their stories. And I think making those connections and hearing their experiences really just kind of catapults our dreams to the nth end, because you're like, wait, I can be just like them. They came into my class. They know who I am, blah, 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 blah. But another class that I took this past year was football and American culture, which was really cool, because obviously not having in-person classes this year, that was my one in-person class, my second semester senior year. And we'd go in every week and just watch a movie. And it was always a sports movie or a football movie. I hadn't seen too many sports movies, and this one opened up all the doors, and I saw so many old films that I'd never even heard of before. I learned about like Junction Boys and Bear Bryant, and mostly we covered a lot of college football and then into the NFL and kind of how the NFL came to be and all the history of that. And I think that's what I really needed kind of going out of college to have under my belt, just so that I could learn to do my own research as well. And like, as a postgraduate now, keep learning, keep reading, keep watching. And that's how I'm going to learn new things and grow in my own self, and into the person that I want to become in sports broadcasting.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that sounds like a really cool class, that football class. I never even heard of that. Like going in, just watching movies all day. That seems like the class for sure. I have to ask you because obviously, this past year was just crazy for everyone with the pandemic. And you mentioned not having that many in-person classes, especially like you being a senior. How was that your senior year sort of being unusual compared to your previous 3 years of college?
Yeah, so it was a little sad and disappointing.
Mm-hmm.
So I was really lucky to have the first 2 years be completely normal and just awesome. I got to experience everything. I was in a sorority. I had this job. I did a couple other things. I was a peer advisor at school too. So then my junior year, I went abroad in the fall semester. So I got really lucky to be able to go on semester at sea and not have any problems with that. That was the fall of 2019. And then, of course, I came back to school in the spring of 2020, had like a good month or so. I think I did like 3 games, maybe sports wise. I did 2 lacrosse games, and I actually called the very last softball game. That was really funny because my broadcast director, I was supposed to be the color commentator, and he had actually called in sick. And he was like, "Oh, yeah, you're actually going to just do the whole broadcast by yourself." And I was like, "Oh, I've never done this before. This is great. Okay, sure. Last minute, so I can do it." So I did the very last, but it was like March 12th or something, and before everything kind of the world fell apart. And so then I was, locked in my room and with my apartment roommates and stuff like that. And then we stopped going to classes junior year, and then that kind of set us up for what senior year would look like. So everything was virtual. My sorority was virtual. We didn't do any fall sports. They were all canceled. So that meant that when we got to the spring season, everything was then moved to the spring season. So we had over, I think, 90 games in one semester. And I think over my entire 4 years, I broadcasted maybe over 200. So it was a lot to do 90 in just one semester. But it was awesome. So obviously all my classes were virtual. Second semester, I had that one in-person class, and at some point it felt normal because we'd been doing it for so long. But it was a shame. I wish I had those connections and been able to go out and see the world, in my last few weeks as a college student. But my graduation was in person, so that was awesome. And that was kind of the last, hurrah at school. And then, I reported on my last game. I had the last lacrosse game was virtual. So I was exactly right here in my my apartment by myself, reporting on the lacrosse game as color commentator. And that was it. I did the last softball game in person, thankfully, and then I was out of there. So it was definitely a weird way to end things. And I wish that I don't want to regret anything because that's just how the world was. And I lived through we're very resilient, as our school would say. We've been through a lot, so I appreciate it. And I think it's humbled a lot of people, including me, to just show me how grateful I am for everything that I do have, and that I'm able to go to class virtually. And now I can continue my education if I want to virtually, because I can. So definitely something to look forward to.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think this year we were able to learn a lot of new stuff and things that we had no clue about a year ago. We now know. So in some ways, just got to look at the positive side of things when it comes to that. I want to ask you though, how was it like balancing schoolwork and then also working with the whole athletics department in Mason? Because I know for me, it definitely can get tough at times. Obviously, if you have a great passion for it, it's worth it, which I have a great passion for. But I want to know, for your experience, what was that like balancing the two?
So working with the athletics department, just specifically kind of accessing the athletes and the coaches that way, was really difficult because they are on a strict schedule. So that means I have to be on a strict schedule because I have to follow them around and work for whenever they are good, and go in for interviews. And I scheduled like sit down interviews to do features right before the pandemic hit. And so that was something that I was really proud of that I got to be able to do. But that I really had to kind of, it was for some of the time when I knew that, especially in the springtime, I knew I was so busy. I knew that I couldn't just go home. I knew that I couldn't just go to a sorority event, or I'd have to make my schedule super, super free, because I'd literally go through all the games throughout the entire semester and put them in my calendar just to see which ones, if I had a super important family event, I knew I couldn't go to that one or whatever. But I would just see, and of course, weather changes everything as well. In the spring, we have snow and cancels games or whatever, especially this year with COVID. things were going out left and right, and we'd have random like Tuesday games that I'd have to make myself available for, even if I had class. So that was definitely something that I just put first, because not only was it something that I really wanted to do, but I knew that I was just going to get even more experience doing it and making the time for it. And I also had to push myself to make sure that I was prepared for everything, because walking into an interview, I never wanted to be unprepared or not have the right questions or not be in the right mental state, or, I didn't want to, come in shambles to the to the athletes or to the coaches. So I wanted to make sure that I was always prepared and professional. And so making time for that out of my crazy, schedule, I always took like 16 credits. It was always insane. And just trying to work around like not having Friday classes so I could report on Friday night games or stuff like that. I really had to make myself available. And I will tell you, I'm very much a procrastinator. So it was very hard. A lot of last minute essays were written. I will say that. But you know what? I don't think that my grades or my class schedule ever suffered for the amount of time that I put in to being a sports reporter for our athletics department, because at the end of the day, making those connections and having them come up to me and be comfortable talking to me, and the athletes knowing who I am, and the coaches, going above and beyond to give us time, that's really what matters at the end. And just their respect for me, and in the end, was all I could ask for. And I couldn't be happier with the content that I created in college, because I know a lot of people don't have access to do that. And I was just really lucky to have the relationship I did with the athletics department.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, the opportunity you had was definitely a unique one. There's a lot of sports journalism students out there who don't have that opportunity to work as many games as you did. I want to know, because you mentioned earlier how you announced a couple games by yourself. How was that like, announcing a game by yourself?
Yeah, so I mentioned the very first one that I called by myself, and I was meant to be the color commentator that day.
Yeah.
Done color before with our broadcast director, who was also a commentator sometimes when he wanted to and when he needed to. And so I kind of learned behind him, and I'd only done like one color commentating for softball. And then that March 2020 kind of rolled around, and our other broadcast director was like, yeah, I can't come in today, I'm sick. Like, this was hours before the game. And he was like, yeah, can you just do both? And I couldn't say no. There was like, if it wasn't me, it was nobody. So I was like, I'm not going to turn away softball. I played, I can figure it out. I just way enhanced my notes and went crazy and made sure I had rosters for every single person and something to say about everyone. And it was definitely rough. I definitely, did not know the lingo. And as much as you watch baseball or softball, professional on the SEC network or on Maston or whatever it is, you're never really prepared for what you think you're going to say and how it actually turns out. So after that first game, I was like, oh, thank God it's over. I never have to do that again. But then after the pandemic, and then we kind of went into my senior year, they were like, yeah, you can just call games by yourself if you feel like it. And I felt like at that point, I was a little bit more prepared now that I'd already done it just one time, that I was like, okay, now I can figure it out. Now I know these players a little bit more, and I know that I know what I need to study for more and what I need to think about. And with the other team getting all their rosters and stats, and I had, just a routine of, a week before or 3 days before setting up those rosters and getting to know the faces, because that's how I really recognize people when you can't see their numbers sometimes. So especially with the helmets, it's super hard, but I just got to know the team really well. And especially softball, I started on the sidelines in the dugout my freshman year. So that was pretty cool. So I had that to talk off of, and we met with the new coach, and he was awesome. So being able to call softball by myself, I did it about a handful of times, I think maybe 5 times this year. It was just a blessing. And I love having somebody else to bounce off of, because it's a little bit more fun. But since I played softball, I can talk so much about it from the player's perspective and just what the mindset is of those girls on the field and what they're thinking, what they're going through. So I think that really relays to the viewers that are watching. And luckily it was on ESPN Plus at this point. So my parents were watching, and it was so fun for them to see me, doing my thing on there. So it was awesome.
That's fantastic. Yeah, nothing better than having your parents actually being able to watch your broadcast. And like, that's the advantage of ESPN Plus and like all these streaming platforms out there. So I want to ask you, like, from your perspective, how have you seen the sports media industry change? And what are your thoughts on social media having an immense effect on the industry itself?
So that's a really good question. And I think that we've seen it most recently too, with even just last night. with YouTube now broadcasting with the MLB network. And I was watching the game last night because it's absolutely historic with all women, and my girl Melanie Newman, who, you know, commentates for the Orioles, was front and center there. And I think that's exactly what's changing. And it's the more people that are moving away from, you know, getting channels and whatever you call that, kind of satellite networks and stuff like that, and moving more into the, you know, Netflix, Hulu packages with Disney Plus and ESPN. They're not getting their sports from the news anymore. And I think that's something that I've heard most recently from people in the industry. I've talked to a couple of people at ESPN, and they're like, that's not where you need to be going. You don't need to be going to a sports network or a news network, because the news stations are getting rid of their sports department. You know, nobody's coming to WJZ, which is our local news station, for sports. They're going to ESPN, or they're going straight to Sports Center, or they're going on their phones to those networks, those apps on Instagram, Twitter. That's where they're getting their information. So I think it's changed a lot. And I think what we saw last night is a lot of people were saying, well, why wasn't it on the MLB network, or why wasn't it on ESPN or Mass and the local stations on TV? And, you know, my answer was YouTube reaches so many more people. That's where they need to start, because as soon as YouTube broadcasts that, they could stick with YouTube forever. I mean, YouTube's going to be around for a much, much longer than all these regular stations are going to be. And if they were on Masson like they normally would be for an Orioles game, only the people that are in Maryland, Delaware, Virginia, local DC networks would see it. So if you're on YouTube, all the people in Florida are going to see it because it was the Rays. All the people that are anywhere that are Rays fans or Orioles fans in San Francisco or New York or wherever, they can see it because it's on YouTube. So I think that direction, and that's the way that sports is going to kind of grow and enhance itself, is really smart at this point, because that's where the millennials and our generation is gravitating towards. And especially for the social media side, like I said, that's where people are going, and that's where content is being created on those social media apps. And Twitter has become such a huge thing. I never thought, I mean, I've always had Twitter, but I've never really utilized it for keeping up with things, because I always just went to Instagram or Facebook or something like that. But Twitter is really a fascinating search engine that you can use to find literally anything. People have told me to look there for jobs, and I'm like, I never would have thought. So I think everything that social media brings out every single day, it's always something new, it's always changing. And so moving away from the television channels is really the direction that I think everyone's going to go in the end.
Yeah, I'm excited to see where it kind of takes off, because it just seems like day by day, week by week, there's just new things coming out with social media and all that good stuff. And it's honestly really helping like advance the sports media industry as a whole. So that's really cool. I have to ask you, throughout your time at Mason, covering all those games, what was your most memorable game that you ever covered?
Ooh, my most memorable. I had somebody ask a question like this the other day, and I really just don't have a great answer for it. But let me think. I had one the other day that I was thinking about. Well, most memorable game. I'll tell you something. We had a softball game this past year, and I'm pretty sure that it was like there was no score the entire time. And I think it was George Mason. It might have been us playing GW. I think we lost those games, but it was just a time and a place where we needed some runs, and we had never had, like, I don't know. In softball, it's different because you don't have that many home runs, I guess, like you do in baseball, maybe. I don't know. It's a little bit different, but I think it was me, and I was a solo commentator for this, and it was a new coach, and he was bringing in this new lineup, and all of a sudden, you know, it was kind of the end of the game, and we had, I think, two runners on, and he brought in this, like, it was a pinch hitter, and it was freshman. Her name, I won't say it, but she was a freshman coming in, and she had hit before, and she's like a big heavy hitter. And I was like, okay, she could shake things up. I don't know. But, you know, sometimes you say that and you lift your spirits, and then, you know, they strike out. Or it was a really, really tough game. And I think it was either tied at 1 or it was nothing. I can't remember, but she came in, and it was like, took the first pitch, took a look at it. Second pitch goes by, and she swings at it, and it's a home run. And I was like, wait a minute, this is a walk-off 3-homer right now. Like, I'm in awe. I couldn't even speak. I like spit it out. I was like, and it's gone, and it's a home run, and it's a 3-run home run, but it's also a walk-off home run. It was like so many different things that she just checked off. And I was like, that's a freshman right there. And it blew my mind because I was calling that at the time, and I had no idea, you know, the severity of it. And then it ended up, and it was like 4-0 or 4-1. And I was like, that was the game. The freshmen just saved the game. And that you don't see that very often, I feel like, in those bigger, Big Ten or SEC schools. And so for us, as an A10 school, to come in and kind of bring our freshmen and have this new coach bring in have everybody have the time to play, I think that's really special to me, because it doesn't show favoritism. And I know that a lot of coaches do. And I've had a lot of people that are friends of mine on teams where the coach just loves to use those juniors and seniors up until they're done and never touch the freshmen until they're seniors. And I don't like that, because it doesn't give everyone a fair chance. And of course, if they're good, you don't know, because you're not playing them. So having the freshmen come in and hit that 3-run homer was just insane. And I think it was such a cool call. And now I have to go back and listen to it, because it's just awesome.
That's awesome to hear. Yeah, you definitely love those big moments like that. Do you have a favorite catchphrase you use during any of your broadcasts? Do you have anything like that?
Ooh, I don't know. I think it was really funny, because we like to, when I'm with our other commentators, we always like to reference other sports. I think everybody does do that. So when we're talking about, softball, it's like a golf swing, or, I don't know. They talk about a lot of, I heard it last night, like he's on the ropes or something, which is like a boxing terminology. But I wish that I could say that I had like a favorite phrase. I've always wanted to like coin one, like it's out of here, or like going way back, those, Chris Berman calls that are just so awesome. But no, I definitely catch myself saying bad words too often. Like my dad will write a list of things that I repeat all the time, and I think those are the only ones I can remember, because I say them. So I was like, absolutely, or certainly, after every time somebody says something, and I just repeat it over and over again. But I'd really like to coin something. I think that'd be really cool to always just be known as like, oh, that's Valerie's phrase. That's something she says, but I wish I had one, but I don't have a good one.
All good, all good. I mean, sometimes those phrases just come at the most random time. So you never know when it's going to come. Is there anything that you wish you knew about like sports media, the industry as a whole, that maybe you didn't figure out until a little bit later in your college career?
I definitely think utilizing your network and the people that you know. And I've definitely picked the brains of the people that I've worked with a little bit. And a lot of my broadcast directors have worked or do work for NBC Washington in the production side of things. And I know the production sides of things, and they've reached out to me and sent me jobs and stuff like that, and tried to get me in there and connected. But I really think utilizing the people that you work with, but also using the teachers that you have that are in the sports media, or just media or news, any type of communications in general, use them, because they know so many people, and obviously they're older than us, so they've been they've been around for a long time. And so I would reach out to people that my journalism professor, and she gave me a huge list of people to reach out to that she knows. And you just never think to do that as a student. I feel like sometimes professors are a little bit daunting to reach out to, but they're people too, and they definitely know what position you're in. And that was something that I was talking to with people that I've been connecting recently. It's like, everybody knows what position you're in. They've been there too. So they realize that, and they want to help you, because now they're at where they are. They can recognize that you want to be somewhere too, so that if they can help you, or extend a name or an invitation to reach out to somebody that they know that could help you get into the industry somehow, they're probably going to do it. And so, you have to reach out to somebody with a purpose. So I think if you have that professor or broadcast director or colleague in your mind, and you reach out to this person and say, hey, this guy, he recommended me to reach out to you, that speaks a lot more than just cold calling them and saying, just sending your resume out without any connection there, because they're not going to know who you are. So utilizing your professors is something I wish I used more. And I was lucky to be a teaching assistant my senior year for a professor who was just really gave me a lot of guidance. And my other professors just know so many people. Like my sports and the media teacher, he knows all of those people that he brought into our class. And one of my other professors works at WUSA 9 in DC as an anchor and reporter. So she brought in a ton of people that I still keep in contact with on social media, and just keeping up with them and keeping the conversation relevant. And so I don't know, I feel like I don't want to be using people, but I don't think that anybody looks at it like that. And I think in my brain, I think like that because I don't want to be annoying or anything like that. But my teacher would always say, it's not annoying, it's assertive. So stick with that and just keep reaching out to people, keep the conversation there. and it will hopefully turn into something. So that's the mindset that I think of, that college students, I think, don't have until they're like seniors and they realize it. So definitely figure it out sooner than I did.
Love that mindset. That's awesome. So, what's the ultimate dream for you in the industry? What are you hoping to achieve? What would you like to do, maybe 5 to 10 years from now?
So my dream job, I guess, would really be to be on the sidelines of like a football or baseball game. Like I aspire to be Erin Andrews, I guess. She's just the idol in my brain. She's done everything, because I also think that she's never stopped at sports. She's gone into the entertainment industry like a lot of others have as well, like Carissa Thompson. I listen to their podcast and it's awesome. But I think being the type of person that doesn't just do one thing, it's sports, it's entertainment, it's news, and having the variety to be able to talk about all those things at once, I think really gives a person an edge up. And I'd love to say that I can be that person. And I can go and report on the Super Bowl, but I can also go and report at the Oscars or whatever, and just be able to have that fluidity there to be able to do both at the same time and figure out how to not get lost doing either, and keep on top of it. But that would definitely be the dream, to be a sideline reporter for like a network like that, Fox. But then we're also saying like, YouTube's the up and comer. So maybe it's kind of getting into that, and that's going to be the next best thing. So it's not going to be necessarily Fox or ESPN anymore. It's going to be YouTube. So I don't know. I definitely just want to be on the sidelines somewhere, but also be able to do entertainment and other things as well, because reporting on the Olympics would be insane. But that's definitely in the cards there too. If you can dream anything, it's got to be over the top. So that's my goals.
Oh yeah, for sure. Those are great goals, and you're really talented. So I would not be surprised if you make it all the way. So seriously, like, just keep up the great work. But I want to go ahead and end this interview, Valerie, with a little bit of a rapid fire, if you're up for it.
Okay, I'm ready.
All right, let's do it. If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
Ooh, maybe like telepathy. What is it? Telepathy?
Like teleporting kind of thing?
Reading people's minds. Telepathy.
Oh, you know what? The name is not in my head, but okay. I think the people know what you're saying.
Powers.
Yeah. I got you.
Yeah.
What's one food you can't live without?
Definitely chocolate.
Chocolate. Okay. Do you have a favorite kind of chocolate?
I would eat any chocolate.
Any chocolate?
I have it at least 3 times a day. It's bad. I gotta stop.
Favorite sports movie?
Oh, I know Meredith said this one too, but The Blind Side. I grew up on that, and I aspire to be Sandra Bullock every single day. So, and Michael Orr was a Raven, so he's in my hometown. I love that movie.
For sure. What's one city you haven't been to but you'd like to visit someday?
Oh, I haven't been to so many cities, but definitely like, I feel like it's so cliche, but like LA. I've never been to Los Angeles. I've been to San Diego, but not LA. So I think just the culture that's there is so different from anywhere I've been. And I mean, Baltimore, I live there. It's different, but and it's awesome. But LA is just such a different vibe. So I'd love to go there.
Nice. If you could describe yourself using just one word, what word is that going to be?
Oh, I would definitely say, I want to say outgoing, but also like giving. I'm very much a giver. Give a lot to my friends and family.
Love that. That's fantastic. Mm-hmm. Okay, dogs or cats?
I'm allergic to both, but definitely dogs. Can't do cats.
What's your favorite animal in general?
Giraffes.
Giraffes?
Mm-hmm.
Nice. I love giraffes too. They're great. You're from Baltimore, so I want to know, what's your favorite thing to do in Baltimore?
My favorite thing to do in Baltimore, honestly, the food here, you can go anywhere. I live in the suburbs, so about 20 minutes from the Inner Harbor, but there's so many things to do. You can go to the aquarium down there. They have such good restaurants down there at the Inner Harbor, or go to like Annapolis. That's like 45 minutes away. That harbor is really cool too. They have a lot of history there. And yeah, definitely like around the Inner Harbor is just a cool place to be. There's history there too, with the old ships that are in the harbor, and Federal Hill, and Yeah, there's a lot of good places, but I'm a foodie. I love to eat. So going to restaurants is just so fun, and seeing the different atmospheres that there are. Some of them are like holes in the wall, but they're the best food you could ever find. So and then there's like high classy 5-star restaurants that are also cool. So I love that. And just being, I don't love cities, but because I grew up around Baltimore, I'm comfortable in that city and I know my way around there. So it's really beautiful when you get to know it.
That's awesome. What's your favorite genre of music?
Ooh, I want to say like pop or EDM. I do like pump up music.
Okay, that's fantastic. And a couple more for you. What are your 3 favorite hobbies to do outside of sports and sports media?
Oh, okay. My dad will kill me, but napping, 100% napping. Never say that in a resume. Napping, also shopping always just makes me feel better. When I'm shopping for like literally anything, could be new tennis shoes or toothpaste, doesn't matter. Okay, one more thing. I also love just watching, um, just like watching TV, but like having me learn something. Also watching old movies. I'll go with that one. Watching old movies because I
Watching
think
old
you
movies.
learn so much from them. Just like the mindset to be in. I love watching old movies.
That's fantastic. That's awesome. And last question for you. What's one fun fact that a lot of people do not know about you?
Ooh, one fact. Okay. Here's something that I didn't talk about. I wanted to be a marine biologist. I don't think a lot of people know that.
Cool.
So
Very
I
cool.
did not want to be a sports reporter until I got to college. So yeah, I wanted to be a marine biologist for so long. I almost went to Florida for college. My home friends know that, but I don't know if anybody else knows that. But yeah.
That's a great fun fact. All right, Valerie. Well, thank you so much again for coming on the podcast today. You seriously were a fantastic guest, provided some great insight, and just keep up the great work. Sky's the limit for you. So can't wait to see what you do in the sports media industry.
Thank you so much for having me. The same to you. You're being very successful with your podcast. I wish I had one too, but it's very popular and I will be listening to this one for sure.
All right. Sounds great. Thank you again for coming on.
Thanks.
All right, fellas, so that was a Sports Suit interview with Valerie Preactor. Another big shout out to Valerie for coming on the podcast today. So lucky I had the opportunity to interview her, and I cannot wait to see what she does down the line in the sports media industry. But that'll do it for today's podcast. Hope you guys enjoyed it as always, and if you did, make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe, and turn on those post notifications so you don't miss a single brand new episode of a Sports Student interview. Thank you so much in advance for doing that. But that'll do it for today's podcast, and I will see you guys in my next one. All right, y'all, take care. Sports Student signing out. Peace.